By July 13th, the U.S. Commerce Department faces a hard deadline to deliver policy recommendations on securing critical mineral supply chains. This impending decision targets silver. While often associated with heritage industries like photography, governments now treat the metal as a highly guarded strategic asset. If you map out the supply chains for advanced military weaponry, next-generation battery technology, and commercial solar fields, they all rely entirely on a steady physical supply of silver. To secure this metal, the government is weighing heavy import tariffs, launching a massive $14.5 billion national stockpile, or even setting a hard import floor of $90 to $100 an ounce. These aggressive policy maneuvers are early, visible symptoms of a government panicking over a much deeper systemic economic disease. That disease is a $39 trillion national debt. Managing this terrifying math problem now falls to the newly appointed Federal Reserve Chair, Kevin Warsh. The government currently pays almost $1 trillion a year simply in interest, surpassing the entire U.S. military budget. To cover this shortfall, the U.S. borrows $7 billion new dollars every single day, strictly to pay interest on the money it already owes. Traditional monetary policy cannot fix a deficit of this size. The government is backed into a corner, and their only mathematically viable escape plan requires aggressively draining wealth from the global economy. The trap tightens because of how sovereign debt works. As old bonds mature, the Treasury has to pay them off by issuing new debt, which gets locked in at current, much higher market rates. This line graph tracks the average interest rate on U.S. government debt. In 2020, that rate sat at roughly 1.5%. Today, it has jumped to 3.4%, tripling the burden of interest payments in just 5 years. The Federal Reserve faces 3 impossible choices, starting with the most intuitive path, cutting interest rates. Slashing rates makes borrowing cheaper, but with energy prices already volatile, it would ignite immediate inflation. Bond investors would then demand higher yields to compensate, driving up refinancing costs anyway and plunging the country further into a debt spiral. Maintaining the current status quo offers no relief. Holding rates here guarantees a slow, agonizing bleed as the debt adds roughly $2 trillion to the deficit every single year. The most volatile option, raising rates, would trigger immediate catastrophe. For every 1% hike on the debt, the government adds $380 billion in annual interest, making default a certainty. Run the math on any of these options, and standard economics offers no survival path. Every traditional lever guarantees either an immediate or an eventual systemic collapse. We have to look back to 1946 to see how this story ends. This was the last time the U.S. debt to GDP ratio crossed the critical 100% threshold. This era was defined by an unorthodox strategy called financial repression. A central bank artificially caps interest rates while allowing inflation to run hotter. This creates a targeted zone of repression. Inside this gap, inflation invisibly melts away the debt's purchasing power, reducing the national burden without triggering a default. Financial repression is now a mathematical necessity. It remains the only tool left in the box capable of preventing an immediate default. This mechanism requires victims to absorb the losses. The damage falls squarely on anyone holding cash, standard savings accounts, or dollar-denominated fixed income assets. It operates as a stealth tax. As inflation runs consistently higher than the interest you earn, the purchasing power of your hard-earned savings simply dissolves, transferring your wealth directly to the government's balance sheet. The victors in this environment are those holding real assets. You cannot print, artificially devalue, or easily manipulate the physical supply of precious metals. This creates immense global shockwaves. A purposefully devalued U.S. dollar destabilizes emerging markets, drains foreign exchange reserves, and forces central banks like India's RBI to adopt highly defensive monetary postures to protect their own economies. In a financially repressed system, true safety isn't found in banking institutions. It is strictly found in physical commodities that exist completely outside the fiat ecosystem. This dynamic explains why major institutional banks are actively forecasting gold to reach $4,500 and eventually push past $5,000 an ounce. These massive projections do not require a black swan event. They don't need a sudden market panic or a new geopolitical war to materialize. This visualization demonstrates the mechanics at play. The surging price of precious metals is the inverse reflection of a currency being intentionally destroyed to pay off sovereign debt. As fiat valuation drops, physical gold and silver must mathematically rise to balance the equation. This revaluation of gold and silver follows the cold logic of the $39 trillion trap. It is the inescapable arithmetic consequence of a system running out of options.